Hello, hello. Good morning, traders. How are we doing today? Hope everybody's doing, excuse me, hope everybody's doing well. It is Monday morning, 1 week away from Christmas. I can't believe that we are, I can't believe that it's almost Christmas already. It's so crazy. Hope you guys are doing good. Hello, good morning, Deep Dive. Hope you're well. You're enjoying that fair value gap and order block indicator. Awesome. Yeah, those are really cool indicators. Have you played around with the proximity versions of them? If not, let's take a quick look. I want to show you this because these are pretty cool. So for anybody who's not familiar, we do have fair value gap and order block indicators that automatically identify fair value gaps and order blocks for you. We'll talk about fair value gaps first. So this guy right here, this is what it's identifying. This is the one fair value gap that it's found. Now, the thing to keep in mind with fair value gaps, particularly these indicators, the gap factor is very important. It's preset to 1. If you make it smaller, let's say 0.5, it's going to identify more gaps. If you make it larger, it's going to identify less gaps, right? And that makes a lot of sense. The bigger the gap, the kind of the rarer the instance. So that's what that is all about. Or that's how that gap factor works. You know, there isn't like a right or wrong setting to this, but by reducing that value, that gap factor value, you will get more fair value gaps drawn on your chart. Order blocks. Kind of a similar idea. Looking for order blocks, look for the last whatever color candle in the direction that it prints. So if you're in a downtrend, the last red candle before it reverses, it's going to print the order block there. If you're in an uptrend, the last green candle before it reverses, you're going to get the order block there. That's kind of the story behind those. Now there is, however, there are secondary indicators called proximity. So if you type in FVG, you're going to see proximity. If you type in OB, you're going to see order block proximity. And it's actually true for gaps too. We have gap proximity. And so what these do, I'm just going to use fair value gaps as the, as the example here. But they all work the exact same way. So fair value gap proximity, and let me change this as well. I just want to make this clearer. I'm going to also, just to kind of, so we can see more examples, I'm going to change the gap factor here. It's a little bit difficult to understand by just looking at it initially. So essentially what we're seeing here, we're seeing prices distance to the nearest fair value gap. That's in the form of this white line. So the nearest gap, the nearest fair value gap, is going to be always denoted by this little dotted line here. And so wherever the white line is relative to the dotted line is price relative to the nearest fair value gap or regular gap or order block. If the white line is above the 0 line, then the nearest gap is below the current price. If the white line is below the 0 line, like in the case right here, see how it's below the dotted line, then the nearest fair value gap to price is above it. And you can see there's the nearest fair value gap, price is below it, right? So the white line is below it. And so we can define things like price relative to a gap, which is actually really helpful because you can utilize it in your scanner. You can strategy test it. You can then turn the idea of testing a retest of a fair value gap into a strategy, or you can hunt for those things. So the way that you would do it is you would say, so you would choose indicator here, and then whatever time frame, and you would use, notice now that I have fair value gap proximity on my chart, it's going to be at the very top of my list here in the scanner. And I can utilize a couple of different things, but the thing that I'm really kind of interested in is this line value, because the line is the white line. So if I said line equals a constant value of 0, well then that means price is right at a fair value gap. And you could, in theory, you could define price, like for example, let's say let's say something like this. We'll say daily line is greater than a constant value of 0. And we'll say, actually, well, I'll just make this one candle ago, and then I'll duplicate it a few times. We'll say 3 candles, 5 candles, 7, 9. So I just want to, you know, just establish that price was above a fair value gap for a period of time. And now price is at that fair value gap. And I'll use a bigger list here. See if we find anything. CTSH on the daily. Well, that didn't find what I was looking for, did it? Maybe I've done this wrong. It is Monday morning after all. All right, what am I missing here? What am I missing? How are you guys doing this morning? Clearly, I'm a little foggy. Sometimes we miss things. Here, I'm going to delete all this stuff and let's rerun. Let's rethink here. There's a few of you guys here. Did y'all have a nice weekend? If you're here, say hello. Deep Dot said good morning. Well, gosh, this is taking an awful long time. I'm going to refresh here. Try this again. If you're here and you have any questions for me, I know I just jumped right in to doing something. If you have questions for me, do not hesitate to ask them. I'm happy to shift focus here. Great weekend trying to lure friends and fam into trading. Oh my, that's an interesting concept. All right, so we can see what's coming up here. Price is testing fair value gaps. We haven't defined the direction that we're testing it from. Looks like there's another one here, but it isn't like fully printing yet. But it's there. You can see it. And then there's another one here. So let's do this. I mean, it would be awesome, deep dive. It would be awesome to have some family to talk shop with all the time. That's for sure. Let's say 0.2. Interesting. Nothing. Let's say 0.1. Nothing. All right. Let's just say greater than 0. And let's do a couple of candles. Huh. So is there? Strange. I might have to talk to Deb about this, because this does not seem to be doing what I think it should be doing. Although, is there another gap somewhere that I'm not seeing? Huh. I'll have to ask about this. Let's try switching time frames. All right, so this is a much clearer representation of what I was hoping to achieve with this idea. So trading above, you got a fair value gap right here. It was created on these 3 candles. Traded above it for a period of time, and now we're coming back to test it. Same idea, fair value gap, trading above it past 3 candles. Now we're testing it. So it looks like on this one, essentially what you have is you have a fair value gap that got created. So you can see the gap right there. So that's probably what that's probably what I was missing here, is that it's creating a gap today. As you can see, there's the gap, that little black line there. And same idea on this one. You've got a gap right here, and there's your gap line. I wonder if I can make that white. Yeah, let's do this. Yeah, there we go. Is Signal Stack affiliated with Sonar Lab? Yes, it is. Well, I mean, Sonar Lab is an affiliate. I'm not sure if they are affiliated with Signal Stack, but I don't necessarily see why they wouldn't be. Why do you ask? Ooh, the women in your circle are machines. Now that's interesting. Yeah, you should definitely try and get the bug. I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you get folks interested. I've tried many a time with many friends. It just has not worked. Oh, yes. Okay, yes. Sonar Lab is. Yes. So hopefully this kind of makes sense, how I just did this. So in this way, we're able to just find price testing gaps, which is pretty sweet. I had created some time ago, I created a strategy on Tesla for this. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, here we go. So essentially what this strategy did was it was testing, it was selling. We can look at the conditions. So you've got the line equal to 0, so price is testing a fair value gap. Price was less than, the line was less than 0 1 candle ago, which means price was below the fair value gap. And then also price closed less than the 20 EMA. So if price is below a 20 EMA, we're shorting retests of the fair value gap. And then we're using price closing above this longer term EMA, this 100 length EMA as our exit. And though it doesn't take a ton of positions, we don't have a ton of positions here. This is something to keep in mind. Technically, this is not, we consider 50 positions to be the minimum to deploy a strategy. You want at least 50 positions worth of data to know how durable that strategy is. But so far, it's actually playing out pretty good. It managed to catch, oops, didn't mean to zoom in there. It manages to catch a lot of the down moves, and it avoids, for a short strategy, it avoids a lot of the, any of the up moves, just completely avoids them. That 20 EMA is the key there, right? Like if your price is below a shorter term moving average, or rather if price is above a shorter term moving average and you're trying to short, maybe not the best idea in the world. So yeah, it kind of avoids, you can see it really nails these down moves, and then it avoids all the chop, it avoids the up move. Pretty interesting. Be interested to see how this plays out over time. Anywho, guys. Anywho. These are also good. Like I said, they're also good for gaps too. So if you do this indicator, let's choose, I don't know, 2 hour. And then gap proximity line is equal to a constant value of 0. Like if you're the type of trader that likes to trade gap fills, this would be the way to do it. Or this would be the way to hunt for them. So we'll say gap proximity line. Let's say maybe less than a constant value of 0. And then I'll copy this a couple of times. My fair value gap. Oop, 2 hour. Okay, so like this, you've got this gap above here. So we're saying that the gap proximity line is equal to a constant value of 0. Right? You're at the 0 line right here, but then the last 5 candles, it was less than. So you can see that's what this is. The last 5 candles below the gap. So we're coming into a gap from above and filling it. If that's your bag, if you are that kind of trader. Although this doesn't look correcto to me. Let me do something real quick. Huh. Huh. Deep dive, what did you just say? I missed it. Oh, okay, so I see what's happening here. So these are, we're getting gap ups here. That's why these are being identified. They're technically testing the gap that they created. And if we do this, it's the same issue as what we were just seeing on the fair value gap. There you go. So there's the new gap. And it's technically it's testing the top of that gap, right? I wonder if there's a way to avoid that. Because that doesn't really do what I want it to do. I don't really want to look for gap ups. We can look for gap ups. Gap ups are easy to find. If anybody's interested in that, I'll show you real quick. If you want to identify a gap up, you can use price. So we could say something like daily low is greater than price daily high 1 candle ago. So that's how you would identify a gap up. Opposite would be true for gap downs. How do I feel about order blocks for scalping on shorter time frames? Do order blocks create gap ups or do they operate similar? Order blocks do not necessarily create gap ups. And how do I feel about them? I'm maybe a little bit indifferent. They kind of do align with a theory that I am interested in. So generally speaking, let me just go. Let me turn this off. So I'm gonna just turn all this stuff off for a moment. So the thing about order blocks that I do like is that they tend to align with important swing areas, like important swing highs and lows, right? Because they are specifically identifying the last candle in an uptrend or a downtrend, right? So they kind of work in tandem. If you add zigzag here, see how they're working in tandem with zigzag? You've got this big move up. You've got your essentially like your last green candle before the pivot and the reversal, or your last red candle before the pivot and reversal. So the way that I would utilize these is I would think of them in terms of trend. And if they align with my read on whatever trend's doing. So like this would make sense as a potential level to short. This order block right here would make sense as a potential level to short simply because that's your bigger swing, right? This high to this low to this high, and then they lost this low. If they were going to make a new high, then what you would anticipate, what they tried to do right here, they tried to hold it. If this had held and continued higher, this order block would have still printed, I assume. I actually don't know for sure, but I would assume that this order block would have still printed, and I would have anticipated that it wouldn't work. That price would continue to make a new high simply because trend would dictate that for me in the way that I kind of look at things. But since they failed, oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Since they did fail and they made a new low, that to me would set up a failure at a test of this high. And really what you have is kind of a longer term, like a giant longer term head and shoulders kind of in there, right? Because you have a shoulder, you have the head, you have the neckline that they lost. So at some point, if it comes back up here, you would anticipate a failure. And we like trades like this, or I like trades like this. I want to say I like trades like this because your risk is super defined. If you were to short somewhere up here, if you were to short this order block, you would have your stop kind of just above this high, right? So you have a really, really tight risk. And your R on this trade is massive, right? Over the longer term, because you're kind of anticipating a failure up here and then a new low wherever we don't know what's going to happen in all of this, but like, let's just say, for example, they ramped it and they went like quite higher, something like that. Well, then you would short up here with a stop just at a new high. Because if they make a new high, then that's telling you, okay, well, then the trend is probably reversing again. And that doesn't mean that they don't come back in. They probably do come back in, but your expectation would be kind of different. If they fail here, then your expectation is a new low, which is, you know, massive. I'm not saying any of this is going to happen. I'm just saying, like, that's how we think about it, or that's how I think about it. This could be, you know, pretend this is like a $2 range, and then that makes it all make a little bit more sense. This is a really long-term chart. But yeah, so anyway, getting back to this idea of like, how do I think about order blocks? I think about them in terms of what's going on with trend. If they align with what trend is saying to me, well then, yeah, they make sense. Let's look at Apple. What time frame you looking at? Looks like I have an alert on. Here we go. Excuse me. Yeah, so this would be tricky for me. Like, I see why you try it, excuse me, but what all I kind of see, or what I notice, is like, this is your big pivot low, right? This is the big pivot low that took you all the way to these highs, and we never made a new low relative to this low. So it would be hard for me to want to short this personally. It doesn't mean it won't work, because it's clearly working right now. They did make a new high. Technically, relative to this one, they made a new high 3 days ago, or 2 days ago, 2 sessions ago. They didn't really hold above it. Different traders have different ideas about, do you consider this a proper new high? Like, they did make a new high, but it could have just been taking stops. You had a bunch of people short off of those new highs, or short off of the old high rather, right? They're using the old high as their stop. And so that's what this kind of looks like. Price came in, took all of those shorts out, and then reversed. Really proper new highs, proper anything when you're talking about price action. You kind of want to see like price hold above a level for a period of time. If it reverses after that, it's still held up here for a while and made new highs. So the way that I would look at it is that like, this is a failure. Something that looked more like this and then reverse would be more of like, they gained the high and now they're reversing. They're going to test something lower and then run it higher again. Is it possible to put a horizontal line on every EMA cross? That's a great question. It is possible, but you'd have to build it uniquely, I think. And there is this. So let me show you. So we have this indicator, and this is a custom written script. So what this is doing, and let me see, it's the 100 SMA. And you can make this whatever you want as far as indicator is concerned. So here's 100 SMA on my chart. And it's essentially every time price crosses that 100 SMA, whether to the upside or the downside, it's putting a little label. I'm going to share this with you. FD. So it's putting a label every time price crosses. So, and I am not a coder. I do not know how to write this, and I'm sorry that I don't have that skill set, but I just don't have that skill set. But I guarantee, or I would assume, I would very much assume that you could write something that did kind of what you're looking for. FD, that's an interesting question too. Like there are a lot of presumptions about that I've heard over my time about the level at which the cross occurs is kind of an important level. We can look at Neo and SQ for a moment. Girl trader. And then as far as anchored VWAP is concerned, FD, let me know if you have any questions about this. You can always reach out to the support team too. They might be able to help you. James over on the support team has been toying around with writing custom indicators for folks. So you might could ask him to see if he has any thoughts on how that could be done. I wouldn't know where to start on it. It's just that's not my area of expertise, unfortunately. Anchored VWAPs. Yes. A couple of different ways you can do it. You can right click. Let me turn off all these indicators here so we can see what I'm talking about. Right click on any candle. Go to create an anchored indicator and you can choose Alpha Trends Anchored VWAP. And it's going to automatically draw that VWAP for you off of that candle that you choose. You can create as many of these as you want. Again, just right clicking on a candle. And choosing create Alpha Trends Anchored VWAP from that candle. There's also this though, inside indicators, type in a VWAP. And there's the Alpha Trends Anchored VWAP. And what this allows you to do, this allows you to define what you're anchoring to. So what candle you're anchoring to. Instead of going on the chart and pointing to it or like clicking on it, you could choose to anchor to the candle with the highest volume, the candle that has the highest high, the lowest low, a blue raindrop or the most recent blue raindrop, a recent gap, and then all of these time candles. So day to date, week to date, month to date, quarter to date, year to date. And the way that all of these different options work for the timed ones, year, quarter, month, week, day, these are all going to be time-based, right? So they're going to automatically adjust based off of what you have defined. If I have week to date defined and say apply, if I go to a 5-minute, here's my week to date anchored VWAP because this is the open of Monday. This is going to stay on my chart until the close of Friday. And then when next week opens, next Tuesday, I suppose, or yeah, right? I don't know if Christmas is Monday or Tuesday or Sunday, Monday or Sunday. Anyway, then the next week when the market opens, this is going to jump to that the open of that candle. So that's how the time ones work. They jump based off of whatever time you have defined. Go back to it. The other ones, highest volume, highest high, lowest low, blue raindrop, recent gap, these are all based off of a candle window. How do you define the highest high or the lowest low or what have you? Well, you define that by using a candle window. And this window can be set from anywhere to from 1 to 300. It says it right here. And essentially the way it works, let's say you have it set to 50. What it's going to do is it's going to anchor to the highest high, the nearest highest high that has a 50 candle window. A window is defined from left to right, like all the way around the candle. So 50 candles around the highest high candle. So 25 to the left, 25 to the right. So that's why it's identifying this candle. Obviously, this is not the highest high that we see on the chart, not by any means, but it is the nearest highest high that has 25 candles to the right and 25 candles to the left, right? That don't have a higher high. If we made that window bigger, like for example, if we made it 100, go back to it, we'll make it 100. What it's going to do, it's going to jump to the candle that contains the highest high that has 50 candles to the right, 50 candles to the left, right? Does that make sense? So now it's jumped to this candle here because it has 50 to the right and 50 to the left. And then from here, you can do whatever you want with this. You can right click on it. You can create alerts on it, right? You can go to your properties. You can add standard deviation bands. You know, some traders like to see the standard deviation bands. It's all up to you. You do whatever you want with it, but that's kind of how that works. And there are a handful of anchored indicators, and they're all going to work in that same way. All right, so let's take a look at NEO. Y'all know when we're looking at charts, we're always zooming out quite a bit. Looks like this thing tested fair value gap. Well, it didn't quite yet, but all right. So looks like death on the monthly. Yeah, anchored VWAP's a really cool tool, man. You know, obviously tons of traders are using it these days. Brian Shannon is a legend. It could be super powerful. There isn't a right or wrong way to use it. Whenever I use it, I pretty much always personally anchor to just what I deem to be the most important candle per the time frame that I'm looking at. So, you know, obviously an all-time high or an all-time low is pretty important, but, you know, if it's nowhere near price, then what's the point? Like, we don't... The anchored VWAP from the 2021 highs is at $24. This is irrelevant when this thing's trading at 832. So then maybe you think about like this high. Where is it relative to that high? Right, that might be a little bit more important to us. This is the near term high, this year's high. That's a little bit more important. It's at 976. It's $1.30 away. That could end up, you know, if this name does keep on pushing higher, this could end up being an important level. And it aligns with a nice gap here. I'm going to remove this and take it straight to the high. Yeah, so I mean, first thing I would look at is that from this year's high in August, you got an anchored VWAP at 824 or 826. Could be an important spot. Takes you right to the bottom of this gap. Somewhere in here, 926 to 954 might be a reasonable place for this thing to pause. We can look at seasonality and see. We know that Januaries tend to be pretty good. 60% win rate in January. It's coming off of a really bad December. So January is one of its better performing months historically over the past 5 years. Not a ton of information there. We could look at unusual options. I always like to filter these out. This is going, right now, it's going to January 2026. No need to look out that far, in my opinion. So maybe we'll look just to like April of next year. Let's filter out some of the small stuff. All right, let's filter out maybe like to 100 grand. Near term, everything's calls. Nothing really huge here. Back to, yeah, nothing really to see there on unusual options. It's always interesting to anchor from gaps too. So yeah, so you've got your gap up today. Excuse me. You've got your gap I'm sorry, not your gap up. I guess it did gap up today, but your kind of your first push above this anchored VWAP from the gap down back in September. First push above that in quite some time. Presumably this happened on volume. Let's see. Yeah, so quite a bit of volume today. Certainly above average. Already above average daily volume, and it's, you know, 2 hours into the session. So then how do you gauge where this thing might go? You can do it all kinds of different ways. What I would probably do, let's turn on auto fibs and see. So you can see kind of the extensions here. Let me add the 2. So the 2x extension of this swing gets us up to the top of the gap. You could also, if this is a local high and it wants to pull in a little bit, you got a 50% retrace and a 618. So like this area kind kind of in here. Oops, that's not what I wanted. This area in here might be worth keeping an eye on between this anchored VWAP and the 0.618. You do have a fair value gap on the daily here. I'll just highlight it. There's your fair value gap. If it loses that 0.618, you might keep your eye somewhere in here, kind of at the bottom of the swing. They did make a new high, technically, and they held lows, right? So here's your previous swing low. Here's your current swing low right here. And then here's your previous swing high, which they've gained. So you kind of want to see them hold this for like a minute, maybe like a candle or two, a day or two. And then if they reverse, I would be looking to be a buyer somewhere in here. Look for some sort of pullback. But they may not do that. You know, who knows? So that's kind of my thinking on Neo. What was the other one? Square. Interesting. Testing. Looks like I've drawn something here. What is this? This is the March 2022 highs. So this is the nearest major high that we have. Testing the anchored VWAP from that high. You can see they've done it quite a few times. Really, really big level, that 75 spot. Really big level that's been really difficult to get through for a while. So key spot to keep an eye on, definitely that 75. Your seasonality looks pretty good coming into January, February. Pretty decent performing months. Not quite as good as in the summertime here, but pretty decent performance over the next couple of months to be expected. Let's jump to the weekly. Yeah, so another fair value gap, top of the fair value gap right here. Another testing. And this is kind of what you would expect. We have made a new low. Right, here's your new low relative to this guy and this guy. So you've made a new low, so you would anticipate failures at new highs. These are the previous highs. Right, here's the previous high. The one before it was here. So you would kind of anticipate failures here. Not a huge surprise to see that. How much has this thing gained over the past 7 weeks? And this thing's up 90. Holy moly. 90%. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's test it. I always like to test this sort of thing. Sort of say price high greater than price low. 7 candles ago. Buy at least 90%. And let's do 30 candles later. How many times has it done this in the past? 3. So off of the COVID lows, we had a 90% move that just absolutely went ballistic right here. This was 30 weeks later. You had a 177% move. If we turn on log scale, we can look at this one. So here was a 90% move off of all-time lows. You had the same deal, a 90% move off of the all-time lows back in 2016. Looks like that move went sideways for a few weeks. It consolidated and dumped. And they tested the low almost to the penny before ultimately reversing it. So this has not happened very many times in the history of this stock. You see we're in now. So where it goes from here, who knows? Not much data there to tell us. But a 90% move in a month and a half feels pretty excessive. Feels like Perhaps it could cool off a little, you know, maybe a little bit. Doesn't mean it has, excuse me, doesn't mean it has to. But the key, to me, the key areas to watch are those highs, you know? Can they make new highs relative to here? Relative to here. If they can do that, well, then you would anticipate that they are going to go higher. But, you know, if they do end up making some new highs, I don't know what they'll look like. But if they do, then I would next anticipate some sort of reversal, and I'd be looking for longs on a reversal. And I would kind of use all the same thoughts, you know, measure a fib somewhere in here, you know, if they do end up gaining, measure a fib, look for where they might pull back. That's kind of where I'm thinking, or that's kind of how I would look at it, girl. Y'all, I have about 10 minutes left. I have to cut today's live stream a little short. We've got a meeting that I have to be a part of in 15 minutes. So I'm going to have to cut things a little bit short. If anybody has any other questions about anything on the platform, hit me with them very quickly. If not, no big deal. How about Mara? What's up, Steve M? Interesting. Kind of in a similar situation, huh? Made a new low, testing previous highs. Ooh. All right, so monthly. Where we at relative to this bad boy? Up and over, good sign. Where we at relative to this bad boy? Up and over, good sign. And the reason why these are good signs is just simply, you know, the anchored VWAPs represent your average buyer. So if your average buyer's in the money, that's what you want to see. Yeah, this is interesting. And go from all-time high too, or rather from IPO up and over that one too. Seasonality, lousy in December, moderate in January, February, then it gets lousy again. June, July, quite better. And this is looking back 10 years. Excuse me. Interesting. Yeah, it looks like they want to make a new high. Relative to this one, I mean, relative to the July highs. I don't follow these Bitcoin miners too much. How you might be able to tell me a little bit better. How do they do relative to Bitcoin? You know, like do they track Bitcoin really closely? There's some missing data here. All right, so let me see this. There's your high. Go back to the weekly. Yeah, so Bitcoin kind of doing what you would, it's kind of what this is kind of what I talk about a lot. Like you have this spot here, this really important spot. This is essentially like a head and shoulders. Most people don't really look at it this way, but this is how I look at it. Essentially, I have a head and shoulders there. And then this is the other shoulder. You've made new lows, so you're anticipating, since you lost the low that brought you up to the high, you're anticipating a failure, and that's exactly what you got. You know, kind of in here. The question is, can they blow off the top? Can they make a new high relative to this one? If they can gain this, it sets you up for up here. Somewhere up in here. You would again, though, expect initially a failure here because you lost this low. right? Price broke down, made a new low, so you would anticipate some sort of failure up here. There might even be like order blocks up here. I would assume there might be one. Maybe this guy or this guy. Let's see. Yeah, right there. So I don't know if, you know, Bitcoin is failing at a pretty logical spot, right? That's the first thought. Turn off log scale. Bitcoin's failing at a pretty logical spot. If Bitcoin is failing at a logical spot, or if Bitcoin is failing, then does Mara fail as well? You know, maybe you want to analyze Bitcoin to gauge expectation on Mara. Here's your fib from the most recent swing low. A pullback to 34, even 33, like, would be healthy. It wouldn't even be bearish. It would just be healthy. And that's a huge move, right? That's like 25% lower. In the relative, like, worst case scenario, you have a huge fair value gap right here. You've got an order block here. Your most recent major swing high is at 32. So if this thing pulled back to 34, 35, is Mara going to move? Is Mara going to move higher on a Bitcoin pullback, on a 20% Bitcoin pullback? I don't know. I kind of doubt it, right? Again, like I say, I don't really watch them. I know you've got the halving coming, right? You've got the ETF approvals coming, or the ETF launch coming. Those are outlier events that could impact the markets. We know that Bitcoin tends to perform pretty poorly in January, but then February performs great. So maybe this is all just a setup. Maybe Bitcoin is setting up to pull back through January and, you know, absorb some of these gains. We can anchor a VWAP from these lows here. Yeah, your anchored VWAP from the September lows at 33. Again, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but like, if they wanted to reverse it here and consolidate some of these gains, how far are we up from those September lows? 80%. You could test an 80% move over this time. How many weeks is this? I'm pretty sure that it's quite bullish. This is over, what, 3 months and a week? So 13 weeks. I don't know. You have those outlier events that could end up, you know, just squashing shorts. For now, it's pausing where it kind of should. If all you do is think about trend, you have a low to a high to a new low. So you would anticipate a failure at a new high, which is exactly what they've done. And right there. But then you have those outlier events that could change the game. So I don't know. It's really difficult to say. Because Mara does look pretty interesting. I guess we'll find out sooner than later, huh? All right, y'all. I got about 5 minutes left. Any last minute questions before I got to run? If not, no big deal. I will be back at it again on Wednesday. I'll be here Wednesday morning talking shop. Anybody who is not yet a TrendSpider trader, now is the time. We've got a holiday sale going on. You can save up to 72% if you prepay for a full year. That is a stupid discount, and it will not last much longer. And next year, we will not be offering these same offers. as far as I understand it. So if you were thinking about signing up for TrendSpider, now is the time, girl trader. Now is the time. Take advantage of this crazy, crazy good deal while it lives, because it won't be around much longer. Do I have ADR, AWR, AMR? Average daily range. AWR. I don't know what AWR is. AMR. No, neither of those things are. What are the long forms? AWR indicator. Let's see. Oh, is it one indicator? Oh, it's one indicator. Projected high low. It's an MT4 indicator. Average daily, weekly, and monthly range. Interesting. I'll tell you what, we don't have it, FD, but again, average weekly range. Well, then, I don't know how you could make the A. I wonder if you, let's see if, does ADR. Ah, okay. So no. I'm trying to think how else you could do it. Well, the first thought that comes to mind, FD, is custom. If you can find the JavaScript version of it, you can just load it in. If there isn't a JavaScript version, then perhaps you could request it and maybe we can make it. I can't guarantee that. We are opening up a marketplace for indicators in the not so distant future, which we're hoping will inspire our folks to create things, because then they can be sold. But for the time being, use that contact us button. And also I will make the request for you too. I'm going to go ahead and make that request for you. But you can always ask questions, just so you guys know. You can always ask questions here in chat via that contact us button. It's available in the platform. It's also available just on TrendSpider webpage. So you don't have to be a TrendSpider trader to utilize that or to talk to those guys. They're happy to assist with whatever questions you have. Just know that that's available for you. But yeah, that's what I would do, FD. I would hit them up, make a request for it. I'll make a request on your behalf as well. And then I would poke around the internet and see if there's any JavaScript code around for it. I don't know. It may be easy to script. I'm uncertain. I'd have to look at it and see. But again, that's not my forte. But I'll make the request for you. Y'all, I got to jump. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. I really appreciate it. This has been fun hanging out, doing a little bit of chart analysis. Don't get to do that very often. Girl Trader, hit me if you have any questions. If anybody needs anything, you know where to find me, at Krutzky Trades on Twitter. Got it. You have the Pine script in the MT5. So what you could do is you could just say, hit up the support team, say, I have this indicator I'm really interested in. Here's the Pine script. Here's the MT5. I don't know. James might be able to help you. Or, if it's something that they think would be really cool to add, maybe we can get the dev team to add it. I can't guarantee that, but if anybody needs anything, hit me up on Twitter. I've got to run. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you for hanging out with me. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Like this video, subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. That way you'll get notifications that I'm going live. And again, I'll probably be live again on Monday, or rather, today's Monday, on Wednesday. Hope you have an awesome trading day. Holler if you need me, and I'll see y'all soon.